The bullet whistled past Kade Harrison's ear so close, he felt the heat of it against his skin. And in that split second before his horse reared and threw him hard against the rocky Arizona ground, he wondered if this was how his luck finally ran out. It was June of 1873, and the sun beat down mercilessly on the parched landscape outside Oro Blanco, a mining town that had sprung up 5 years earlier when silver deposits were discovered in the nearby mountains. Kade had been riding the trail between Tucson and the smaller settlements, carrying dispatches and occasionally doing work for the territorial marshal when the pay was decent. He was 28 years old, lean and weathered from years in the saddle, with dark hair that curled at his collar and eyes the color of storm clouds. The ambush had come without warning. 3 men had burst from behind a cluster of massive saguaro cacti, their faces covered with bandanas, their revolvers already firing. Kade's horse, a gray gelding named Smoke, had panicked and bucked, sending Kade tumbling. He hit the ground hard enough to knock the wind from his lungs, his own gun flying from his holster to land somewhere in the scrub brush. Through the ringing in his ears, Kade heard the bandits shouting, heard the thunder of hooves approaching. He tried to roll to find cover, but his body would not cooperate. His vision swam, darkening at the edges. One of the riders was nearly on top of him, the man's face a blur above the bandana, his pistol leveling at Kade's chest. Then came a sound that cut through the chaos like a blade through silk. A rifle shot, sharp and precise. The bandit jerked backward in his saddle, his gun falling from nerveless fingers. His companions wheeled their horses, confusion evident in their sudden movements. 2 more shots rang out in quick succession, kicking up dirt at the horses' hooves. The animals screamed and bolted, carrying their riders back the way they had come, leaving their wounded companion to slump forward and then slide from his saddle. Kade lay on his back, chest heaving, watching the sky wheel overhead. Footsteps approached, light and quick. A shadow fell across his face, blocking out the brutal sun. He blinked, trying to focus. A young woman stood over him, a Henry rifle held with practiced ease in her small hands. She could not have been more than 16 or 17 years old, slight of build, with honey-colored hair pulled back in a practical braid. Her dress was simple calico, covered by a leather vest, and her boots were scuffed and worn. But it was her eyes that caught his attention, even through his dazed state. They were green as spring grass, sharp and intelligent, scanning him for injuries. "Can you stand?" she asked, her voice clear and steady despite what had just happened. Kade tried to speak, managed only a groan. His ribs felt like they were on fire. "Never mind," she said, glancing toward where the bandits had disappeared. "They might come back with reinforcements. My wagon is just over that rise. Can you walk if I help you?" With her assistance, Kade managed to get to his feet, though every breath sent pain lancing through his side. The girl was stronger than she looked, supporting his weight as they stumbled toward a battered wagon hitched to a mule. She helped him into the back, where he lay among crates and sacks, then climbed onto the driver's seat and set the wagon in motion. "My horse," Kade managed to gasp. "I saw him run off toward town. If he has any sense, that is where he will head. Someone will catch him." She glanced back at him, her expression concerned. "You took a hard fall, might have broken ribs. I am taking you to Doc Winters in Oro Blanco." The wagon ride was a blur of pain and heat. Kade drifted in and out of consciousness, aware only of the jolting motion and the occasional glimpse of that honey-colored braid swaying with the movement. Once, when he cried out at a particularly rough patch of road, the girl began to sing, her voice soft and surprisingly sweet, an old ballad about a sailor far from home. By the time they reached Oro Blanco, Kade had slipped into a fevered darkness. He would later learn that he had indeed cracked 3 ribs, suffered a concussion, and had been closer to death than he realized. The fall had done more damage than the bullets ever could have. Doc Winters, a gruff man with capable hands, set Kade's ribs and kept him under observation for 3 days. When Kade finally woke with a clear head, he asked immediately about the girl who had saved him. The doctor frowned. "Young thing with a rifle, brought you in and then disappeared. Did not even give her name. I have been asking around town, but no one seems to know who she was. Might have been passing through." Kade tried to remember details, but the memory was frustratingly vague. Honey-colored hair, green eyes, a voice like cool water, a courage that seemed beyond her years. He spent another week recovering in Oro Blanco, asking everyone he met if they knew of a young woman matching that description. No one did. Eventually, his work called him away. The dispatches had to be delivered, the jobs completed. But Kade never forgot that day on the trail, never forgot the girl who had appeared like an angel and saved his life. He kept her memory close, a bright spot in the often harsh existence of frontier life. Now, 10 years later in the summer of 1883, Kade Harrison found himself riding back into Oro Blanco for the first time in a decade. He was 38 now, the lines around his eyes deeper, his body marked with the scars of countless confrontations and narrow escapes. He had worked as a lawman for a while, then as a scout, and most recently had purchased a small ranch in New Mexico. But business had brought him back to Arizona, and nostalgia had drawn him to the town where a mysterious girl had once saved his life. Oro Blanco had grown in the intervening years. The main street was wider, lined with more substantial buildings. A new hotel stood where a tent saloon had once been. The mining operations had expanded, bringing more people, more commerce, more civilization to what had been a rough outpost. Kade stabled his horse, a sturdy chestnut mare named Copper, at the livery and walked to the hotel to secure a room. His business in town would take a few days. He needed to meet with a mine owner about supplying beef to the operation, a potentially lucrative contract that could make a real difference to his struggling ranch. That evening, he found himself in the town's restaurant, a respectable establishment called the Silver Dollar. The place was busy, filled with miners and merchants, the clatter of dishes and the murmur of conversation creating a pleasant background noise. Kade ordered steak and coffee, content to sit and observe. That was when he saw her. She emerged from what must have been the kitchen, carrying a tray laden with dishes. She was older now, of course, perhaps 26 or 27, but he recognized her instantly. The honey-colored hair, though now pinned up in a more sophisticated style. The slight build, though she had filled out into a woman's figure, and when she turned, those eyes. Green as spring grass, sharp and intelligent, Kade's heart began to pound. Could it really be her, after all these years? She moved through the restaurant with practiced efficiency, delivering meals, refilling coffee cups, smiling pleasantly at the customers. She wore a simple but clean dress of dark blue, covered by a white apron. There was a quiet competence in her movements, a self-assurance that reminded him of that young girl holding a rifle with such steady hands. He watched as she approached his table, her attention on her order pad. "Good evening, sir. Can I get you anything else?" The voice was the same. Older, but still clear and steady. Kade had to swallow before he could speak. "I believe you already gave me everything I needed once, about 10 years ago on the trail outside this town." She looked up sharply, her green eyes meeting his. For a moment there was no recognition, only polite confusion. Then something shifted in her expression. Her eyes widened slightly, and he saw her take in his features with new attention. "The dispatch's rider," she said softly. "The one who was thrown from his horse." "Kade Harrison," he said, standing and extending his hand. "And I never got the chance to thank you properly." A slight flush colored her cheeks as she took his hand briefly. Her grip was still firm and sure. "Hannah Reeves, and there is no need for thanks. Anyone would have done the same." "Not everyone carries a Henry rifle and knows how to use it like that," Kade said. "You saved my life, Miss Reeves." "Mrs. Reeves, actually," she said, and Kade felt his heart sink. Of course she was married. 10 years was a long time. A woman like this would not have remained single. He must have shown his disappointment because she added quickly, "I am a widow. My husband passed 3 years ago." "I am sorry for your loss," Kade said, meaning it. Hannah glanced around the busy restaurant. "I should attend to the other customers. But if you are in town for a few days, perhaps we could talk properly. I confess I have often wondered what became of you." "I would like that very much," Kade said. They arranged to meet the following afternoon, during the quiet hours between the lunch and dinner rush. Hannah would show him around Oro Blanco, she said, point out all the changes that had occurred since his last visit. Kade barely slept that night. His mind kept returning to those green eyes, that familiar voice. He told himself to be cautious. 10 years was a long time. They were strangers, really, connected only by a single incident from the past. And yet, he could not shake the feeling that finding her again meant something, was somehow significant. The next day dawned clear and hot, as most days did in Arizona. Kade completed his morning business meeting with the mine owner, securing preliminary agreement on the beef contract, then returned to the hotel to clean up before meeting Hannah. She was waiting for him on the hotel's front porch, dressed now in a lighter dress of pale green that made her eyes even more vivid. She had a bonnet to protect her from the sun, and she smiled when she saw him approach. "Ready for the grand tour?" she asked with gentle humor. They walked through Oro Blanco together, and Hannah pointed out the new buildings, told him stories about the town's growth and the characters who lived there. She showed him the schoolhouse, built just 2 years earlier, where she sometimes helped teach reading to the younger children. She showed him the church, whitewashed and proper, such a contrast to the rough tent meetings he remembered from before. As they walked, they talked. Kade told her about his work over the years, the places he had been, the ranch he was trying to build in New Mexico. She told him about her life, and gradually, the story emerged. Hannah had been only 17 when she had saved Kade on that trail. She had been traveling with her father, a wandering preacher who moved from settlement to settlement. Her mother had died when Hannah was young, and her father had raised her alone, teaching her to shoot because the frontier was dangerous, and a woman needed to know how to protect herself. They had stayed in Oro Blanco for a few months after the incident with Kade, but then her father's calling had moved them on. They had traveled throughout Arizona and New Mexico for years. When Hannah was 22, they had returned to Oro Blanco, and her father had decided to settle there permanently. He had built a small church and served the community until his death 2 years ago. "And your husband?" Kade asked gently as they sat on a bench outside the general store, watching the town go about its business. Hannah's expression grew sad. "Thomas Reeves. He was a miner, a good man. We were married only a year when there was an accident in the shaft, a cave-in. He was killed instantly, along with 2 other men." "I am so sorry," Kade said. She nodded, accepting his sympathy. "It has been 3 years now. The pain has lessened, though I still miss him. We had hoped to start a family, to build a life together, but it was not meant to be." "And now you work at the restaurant." "I own it, actually," Hannah said with a small smile. Thomas left me a small amount of money from his mining claim, and I used it to buy the silver dollar. I had been working there already, and the previous owner wanted to retire. It has been a good investment. The business is steady, and I enjoy the work. Kade found himself impressed. She had taken tragedy and turned it into opportunity, had built a life for herself in a place where many women would have struggled alone. "And you?" Hannah asked. "Never married?" Kade shook his head. "Came close once or twice, but it never quite worked out. The life I led was not conducive to settling down. Always moving, always chasing the next job. The ranch is my first real attempt at putting down roots." "Is it working?" she asked. Slowly, he admitted. "It is harder than I expected. The land is good, but cattle are expensive, and there is always something that needs fixing or building or tending. If I can secure this contract with the mine here, it would make a real difference. Steady income for at least a year, maybe more." They continued talking as the afternoon wore on, and Kade was struck by how easy it was to be with her. There was no awkwardness, no straining for conversation. They simply talked, sharing stories and observations, laughing at shared humor, falling silent companionably when words were not needed. As the sun began to sink toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, Hannah said, "I should get back to the restaurant. The dinner rush will begin soon." Kade walked her back, reluctant for the afternoon to end. At the restaurant door, Hannah turned to him. "Thank you for today. It has been lovely to see you again, to know that you recovered from that awful day." "The pleasure was entirely mine," Kade said. "And Hannah, I know I said it last night, but I need to say it again. Thank you for saving my life. I have thought about you often over the years, wondered who you were, if I would ever have the chance to thank you properly." She looked at him with those green eyes, and there was something soft in her expression, something warm. "I am glad fate brought you back to Oro Blanco, Kade Harrison." Over the next several days, Kade and Hannah fell into a pattern. He would attend to his business during the mornings and early afternoons, negotiating the details of the beef contract, making arrangements for transportation and delivery schedules. Then he would meet Hannah, and they would spend time together. Sometimes they walked through town or out into the desert, where the landscape was harsh but beautiful in its own way. Sometimes they simply sat in the restaurant during quiet hours, drinking coffee and talking. Kade found himself telling her things he had never shared with anyone, about his childhood in Missouri, about the war that had scattered his family, about the loneliness of a life lived always on the move. Hannah shared her own stories as well. She spoke of her mother, dead too young from fever. She spoke of her father, a kind but restless man driven by his faith to bring salvation to the frontier. She spoke of her brief marriage, of the love she had felt for Thomas, and the grief of losing him. "I thought I would never feel anything again," she admitted one evening as they sat on the porch of her small house behind the restaurant, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. "After Thomas died, I just felt numb. I went through the motions of living, but it was as though I was watching my own life from a distance." "What changed?" Kade asked quietly. She turned to look at him, and in the lamplight from inside the house, her eyes seemed to glow. "I suppose time changed it, and keeping busy, and learning that life continues whether we are ready for it or not." Kade reached out and took her hand, a gesture that felt both bold and entirely natural. She did not pull away. Her fingers intertwined with his, and they sat in comfortable silence, holding hands like young sweethearts rather than two people who had lived full and difficult lives. "I leave in 3 days," Kade said eventually, hating the words even as he spoke them. "I need to get back to the ranch. There is work waiting, and I have been away too long already." "I know," Hannah said softly. "Come with me," Kade said. the words surprising him even as they left his mouth. He had not planned to say them, had not consciously thought them, yet somehow they felt absolutely right. Hannah turned to face him fully, her expression startled. "What? Come to New Mexico. Come see the ranch. If you do not like it, I will bring you back here, no questions asked. But Hannah, these past days with you have been the happiest I can remember in years. Maybe ever. And I know it is crazy. We barely know each other, not really, but at the same time I feel like I have known you forever." "Kade," she said, and her voice was uncertain, torn. "I am not asking you to marry me," he said quickly, though part of him wanted to do exactly that. "I am just asking you to take a chance. To see if what I am feeling, what I think we are both feeling, is real." Hannah was quiet for a long moment, and Kade forced himself to wait, to let her think. Finally, she said, "I cannot just abandon the restaurant. I have responsibilities, employees who depend on me." "I understand," Kade said, trying to hide his disappointment. "But," Hannah continued, "I do have a very capable manager. Mrs. Chen has been with me for 2 years and she could run things for a while. And I suppose I am entitled to a holiday. I have not had one since I bought the place." Hope flared in Kade's chest. "Is that a yes?" Hannah smiled, and it was like the sun breaking through clouds. "It is a perhaps. Let me think about it. Let me make arrangements. If I can leave the restaurant in good hands, then yes, I will come visit your ranch." Kade wanted to pull her into his arms, to kiss her, to express the joy he felt. But he restrained himself, merely squeezing her hand and grinning like a fool. "You will not regret it, Hannah. I promise you that." The next 2 days were a flurry of activity. Hannah met with Mrs. Chen, a competent widow from San Francisco who had come to Arizona seeking a fresh start and had found employment at the Silver Dollar. Mrs. Chen was delighted at the prospect of managing the restaurant, assuring Hannah that everything would be fine. Hannah also spoke with the other women in town, her friends and acquaintances, and their reactions ranged from supportive to scandalized. Some thought it romantic that she was taking a chance on a new relationship. Others worried about propriety, about a widow traveling alone with a man to whom she was not married. "Let them talk," Hannah told Kade when she reported these conversations. "I have lived by other people's rules and expectations long enough. If I want to visit a friend's ranch, that is my business." They departed Oro Blanco on a clear morning, with Hannah's belongings packed into Kade's wagon alongside his own supplies. She had brought enough for an extended stay, though they had not discussed exactly how long that might be. The trip would take several days, following the trail east and then north into New Mexico. As they left the town behind, Kade glanced at Hannah sitting beside him on the wagon seat. She was looking back at Oro Blanco, watching it recede into the distance, and he wondered if she was having second thoughts. "Nervous?" he asked. She turned to him and smiled. "A little, but also excited. I have not been on an adventure in a long time." The journey to Kade's ranch was indeed an adventure. They traveled through landscapes that ranged from desert scrubland to pine-covered mountains. They camped under the stars, and Kade was careful to maintain propriety, sleeping on the opposite side of the campfire and treating Hannah with perfect respect. They talked endlessly, learning more about each other with every passing mile. One evening, as they made camp near a small creek, Kade asked the question that had been nagging at him since they met again. "Why did you never tell anyone in Oro Blanco about saving me? Doc Winters said you just disappeared after bringing me in." Hannah was quiet for a moment, poking at the fire with a stick. "My father and I were only supposed to be passing through. We had our own supplies, our own wagon. I saw what happened to you on the trail, and I could not just leave you there. But after I got you to the doctor, Father wanted to move on. He was always restless, always feeling called to the next place. And I suppose I thought it did not matter. You were alive. You would recover. What did it matter who I was? It mattered to me, Kade said quietly. I looked for you. I asked everyone in town. I am sorry, Hannah said, meeting his eyes across the fire. If I had known, perhaps I would have stayed, but I was young and I did what my father wanted. And now here we are, Kade said. 10 years later, brought back together. Maybe it was meant to be this way. Maybe, Hannah agreed, and there was something in her voice, something soft and wondering that made Kade's heart skip. They reached Kade's ranch on the 5th day of travel. The property was nestled in a valley with a small river running through it, surrounded by hills covered in pinyon pine and juniper. The house was modest, built of timber and adobe, with a wide porch that faced the morning sun. There was a barn, a corral, and several outbuildings in various states of completion. It is not much, Kade said as they approached, suddenly seeing his home through Hannah's eyes and finding it wanting. I have been working on improvements, but there is only so much one man can do. It is beautiful, Hannah said, and she sounded sincere. Look at this valley, Kade. Look at the water and the trees. You could build something wonderful here. Over the following weeks, they fell into a routine that felt remarkably natural. Kade worked on the ranch, tending to his small herd of cattle, making repairs, improving the property. Hannah helped where she could, cooking meals that were far better than anything Kade had managed for himself, organizing the chaotic interior of the house, even assisting with lighter chores. But more than the work, they simply enjoyed being together. They would sit on the porch in the evenings, watching the sun set over the hills, talking about their dreams for the future. They would ride out together, exploring the surrounding land, and Hannah proved to be an excellent rider with a good eye for the country. One day, about 3 weeks after their arrival at the ranch, they rode up into the hills to a spot where Kade had found a natural spring. The water pooled in a small basin surrounded by smooth rocks, creating a private oasis in the wilderness. They dismounted and sat by the water, enjoying the cool respite from the summer heat. I should think about returning to Oro Blanco, Hannah said, though her tone suggested she was not eager to do so. I have been away for nearly a month. Mrs. Chen will be wondering if I plan to come back at all. Kade felt his chest tighten at the thought of her leaving. Do you want to go back? Hannah picked up a small stone and tossed it into the pool, watching the ripples spread. Part of me does. The restaurant is my livelihood, my security. I built it from nothing after Thomas died. And the other part? Kade asked. She turned to look at him, and her green eyes were full of emotion. The other part wants to stay here, with you. But Kade, we have been avoiding the real conversation. What is this between us? What are we doing? Kade took a deep breath. It was time for honesty, complete and total. I am falling in love with you, Hannah. Maybe I have been since that day 10 years ago when you saved my life. Maybe I am only realizing it now. But I know that when I think about you leaving, when I imagine going back to the way things were before, alone on this ranch with only my own thoughts for company, it feels unbearable. Hannah's eyes glistened with unshed tears. I am falling in love with you too, but I am frightened, Kade. I lost Thomas so suddenly. One day he was here and the next he was gone. What if I let myself love you and then something happens? What if I cannot survive losing someone again? Kade moved closer to her, taking her hands in his. I cannot promise that nothing will ever happen to me. Life on the frontier is uncertain. We both know that. But I can promise that I will do everything in my power to come home to you every night. And I can promise that whatever time we have together, I will cherish every moment. Kade, she whispered, and then she was in his arms and he was kissing her for the first time. Her lips were soft and warm and she tasted like coffee and sweetness. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, and then it deepened as they both gave in to the feelings that had been building between them. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Kade rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me, Hannah. Stay here. Build this life with me. We can make the ranch into something amazing together, and if you want to keep the restaurant, we can work something out. We can travel back and forth, or we can sell it and invest the money here. Whatever you want, we will make it work." Hannah laughed, a sound full of joy and tears. "Are you sure?" "We have only known each other a few weeks." "We have known each other for 10 years, Kade corrected. "We just were not together for most of them. But Hannah, when I was lying on that trail, broken and bleeding, you appeared and saved me. You have been saving me ever since, even when I did not know it. Every hard day, every lonely night, I would think about the girl with the green eyes and the rifle, and I would remember that there was goodness in the world. And now here you are, real and alive and more wonderful than any memory. How could I let you go? You sweet, foolish man," Hannah said, tears streaming down her face now. "Yes, yes, I will marry you. I will stay here and build this life with you." They rode back to the ranch house in a state of euphoria, making plans and dreaming aloud. They would marry in Oro Blanco, Hannah decided, because she wanted her friends there to see. And then they would return to the ranch and begin their life together in earnest. But first, Hannah needed to return to Oro Blanco to arrange the sale of the silver dollar. Mrs. Chen, it turned out, was interested in purchasing the restaurant, and she had the funds to do so. The sale was completed within 2 weeks of Hannah's return, and she used the proceeds to purchase additional cattle for the ranch and materials for expanding the house. They were married in September of 1883 in the whitewashed church where Hannah's father had once preached. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt, attended by the friends Hannah had made in Oro Blanco and a few of Kade's acquaintances from his years on the frontier. Hannah wore a dress of cream-colored silk, simple but elegant, and Kade wore a new suit that made him feel awkward but that Hannah assured him looked handsome. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Kade kissed Hannah with all the love and passion he felt, and the congregation cheered. At the reception that followed, held in what had been the silver dollar and was now Mrs. Chen's establishment, people danced and celebrated late into the night. As Kade and Hannah danced together, swaying to the music played by a fiddle and guitar, Kade said, "I need to tell you something. Something I have been thinking about since we met again." "What is it?" Hannah asked, looking up at him with those green eyes that still took his breath away. "That day on the trail when you saved me, I was not just injured. I was lost. I had been drifting for years, no purpose, no direction. Just moving from one job to the next, never building anything, never connecting with anyone. You saved more than my life that day, Hannah. You gave me hope. You showed me that there was still beauty and courage in the world. And even though I did not know who you were, even though I thought I might never see you again, you changed me. You made me want to be better, to build something, to be worthy of the second chance you had given me." Hannah's eyes filled with tears again, happy tears this time. "I had no idea. I thought I was just doing what anyone would do." "You were being exactly who you are," Kade said. "Brave and kind and strong, and I have owed you my heart all along from that very first day. I just did not realize it until now." Hannah pulled him close, holding him tight as they danced. "Then I will treasure it," she whispered, "for all the days of my life." They returned to the ranch after a brief honeymoon spent in Tucson, and they threw themselves into building their life together. The beef contract with the mine in Oro Blanco proved lucrative, and within a year, Kade was able to expand his herd significantly. Hannah proved to have a keen head for business, managing the accounts and making smart investments that helped the ranch prosper. But it was not just the financial success that made their life together fulfilling. It was the small moments, the everyday joys. It was waking up next to each other every morning, reaching for each other in the darkness. It was working side by side during the day, whether it was mending fences or preparing meals or simply sitting together doing accounts. It was the conversations that lasted late into the night about everything and nothing. It was the laughter they shared, the dreams they built together. In the spring of 1885, Hannah told Kade that she was expecting their first child. Kade was overjoyed, terrified, and overwhelmed all at once. He immediately became overprotective, trying to prevent Hannah from doing any heavy work, which she found both endearing and exasperating. "I am pregnant, not fragile," she told him firmly when he tried to stop her from hanging laundry. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time. I will be fine." But Kade could not help himself. The thought of anything happening to Hannah or their child filled him with a fear he had never known before. He had faced down outlaws and wild animals without flinching, but the prospect of childbirth terrified him. Their son was born in December of 1885, during the cold winter months when snow dusted the hills around the ranch. The labor was long and difficult, and there were hours when Kade paced the living room in agony, listening to Hannah's cries from the bedroom and feeling utterly helpless. But when the midwife they had brought from a neighboring ranch finally emerged with a squalling, red-faced infant, Kade's terror transformed instantly into overwhelming love. They named him Daniel Thomas Harrison, honoring Hannah's late first husband. Kade held his son for the first time with shaking hands, awed by the tiny, perfect features, the small fists waving in the air. "He is beautiful," Kade whispered, tears streaming unashamedly down his face. "You did so well, Hannah. I am so proud of you." Hannah, exhausted but glowing with joy, smiled at him from the bed. "We made him together. He is ours, Kade, our family." Daniel was a healthy, happy baby who grew quickly. He had his mother's green eyes and his father's dark hair, and he was curious about everything, always reaching for new things, always wanting to explore. As he grew from baby to toddler, he became Kade's constant shadow, following his father around the ranch, trying to help with chores in his small, clumsy way. Life settled into a rhythm of contentment. The ranch continued to prosper, and they were able to hire a few hands to help with the work, which made things easier. Kade and Hannah built additions onto the house, expanding it to accommodate their growing family and their growing success. In 1888, Hannah gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Grace Marie Harrison. She was smaller than Daniel had been, with honey-colored hair like her mother and eyes that would eventually settle into a warm brown. Daniel, now 3 years old, was fascinated by his baby sister and insisted on helping care for her, bringing her toys and singing to her in his childish voice. Kade would sometimes sit on the porch in the evenings, watching Hannah rock Grace while Daniel played nearby, and feel such profound gratitude that it brought tears to his eyes. This life, this family, this love, it was more than he had ever dreamed possible. One evening, as they sat together after putting the children to bed, Hannah said, "Do you ever think about that day on the trail? About what would have happened if I had not been there?" "Sometimes," Kade admitted, "but not the way you might think. I do not dwell on the possibility of dying. I think about the miracle of living, about how one moment, one person, one act of courage can change everything." Hannah leaned against him, and he put his arm around her. "I think about it too," she said, "about how close I came to just riding past, to not getting involved. Father wanted to keep moving. He thought it was too dangerous to intervene, but something made me stop, made me act. I am grateful you did." Kade said, kissing the top of her head. "Every single day I am grateful." The years continued to pass, marked by the changing seasons and the milestones of their children's lives. Daniel grew into a bright, energetic boy who loved the ranch and the animals, who followed his father everywhere and asked endless questions about everything. Grace became a sweet, gentle child with a love for music and stories, who would sit for hours listening to Hannah read or sing. In 1891, Hannah gave birth to their third child, another son they named Samuel Henry Harrison. Samuel was different from his siblings from the start, quieter and more thoughtful, content to observe the world around him with solemn, dark eyes. The ranch had become one of the most successful in the territory, known for the quality of its beef and the integrity of its owners. Kade had contracts with multiple mining operations and military outposts, and the steady income allowed them to live comfortably while still investing in improvements and expansion. But more than the material success, it was the richness of their family life that made them truly wealthy. They were surrounded by love, by laughter, by the joy of watching their children grow and learn. They had friends in the surrounding ranches and in the towns where they did business. They had built something real and lasting. One day in the spring of 1893, when they had been married nearly 10 years, Kade and Hannah took a rare day away from the ranch, riding out to the spring in the hills where Kade had first proposed. They left the children in the capable care of their foreman and his wife, and they spent the day together, just the two of them, remembering and dreaming. They sat by the pool, watching the water sparkle in the sunlight, and Kade took Hannah's hand. "Do you remember what I told you the day we got married, about owing you my heart?" "I remember," Hannah said softly. "I need you to know that it is still true," Kade said. "Every day with you has been a gift. Every moment, every challenge, every joy, I am grateful for all of it. You saved my life twice, Hannah. Once on that trail, and once when you agreed to take a chance on me, on us." Hannah turned to him, her green eyes bright with love. "You saved me too, you know. After Thomas died, I thought I was done with love, done with building dreams. I thought I would just exist, going through the motions. But you woke me up again. You showed me that it was possible to love again, to hope again, to live fully instead of just surviving." They made love that afternoon by the spring, under the open sky, with the warmth of the sun on their skin and the sound of water and birdsong around them. It was passionate and tender, a reaffirmation of everything they meant to each other, everything they had built together. As they rode back to the ranch in the golden light of late afternoon, Kade thought about the journey that had brought them here. From that moment of violence and fear on a dusty trail to this moment of peace and joy. From strangers connected by a single act of courage to partners in every sense of the word, building a life and a legacy together. The children ran out to meet them when they arrived home, Daniel and Grace racing each other while little Samuel toddled behind, his face split in a huge grin. Kade dismounted and scooped up his youngest son, tossing him in the air and catching him, delighting in the boy's squeals of laughter. Hannah gathered Daniel and Grace close, listening to their chatter about their day, about the new calf that had been born while they were gone, about the bird's nest they had found in the barn. That night, after the children were asleep, Kade and Hannah lay in their bed, wrapped in each other's arms. Through the open window, they could hear the sounds of the ranch settling for the night. The lowing of cattle, the chirp of crickets, the rustle of wind through the trees. "Kade," Hannah said softly into the darkness. "Yes, love, thank you. For what? For finding me again, for loving me, for giving me this life." Kade held her tighter. "I could say the same to you. We found each other, Hannah. We saved each other, and we built this together." The years continued to unfold, bringing new challenges and new joys. The children grew, each developing their own personalities and interests. Daniel proved to have his father's way with animals and his mother's head for business. Grace discovered a talent for art, filling the house with drawings and paintings. Samuel revealed a quiet strength and a deep empathy that made him beloved by everyone who knew him. Kade and Hannah grew older together, their faces gaining lines and their hair showing threads of silver, but their love remained as strong as ever. They still took time for each other, still made each other laugh, still reached for each other in the night. In 1896, Daniel turned 11 and began taking on more responsibilities around the ranch. He worked alongside his father with pride, learning the skills he would need to one day run the operation himself. Kade watched his son growing into a capable young man and felt a deep satisfaction. This was his legacy, not just the land and the cattle, but the values he was passing on, the lessons about hard work and integrity and love. One evening, as the whole family sat around the dinner table, Grace asked, "Papa, how did you and Mama meet?" Kade and Hannah exchanged glances, sharing a smile. They had told the children some of the story before, but never all the details. "Well," Kade began, "it was a long time ago, before you were even born. I was riding the trail between Tucson and Oro Blanco when some very bad men tried to rob me. They ambushed me and my horse threw me hard on the ground. I thought I was done for." "But then what happened?" Daniel asked, leaning forward with interest. "Then your mother appeared," Kade said, looking at Hannah with all the love he felt. "She was just 17 years old, but she was brave as could be. She had a rifle and she drove those bad men off. She saved my life." "That is amazing," Grace breathed. "Mama, you were a hero," Hannah laughed, a slight blush coloring her cheeks. "I just did what needed to be done." "But here is the really interesting part," Kade continued. "After your mother saved me and brought me to the doctor, she disappeared. I looked for her, but I could not find her. For 10 years I did not know who she was or where she had gone." 10 years?" Samuel asked, his eyes wide. 10 years, Kade confirmed. "And then, by the greatest stroke of luck, I came back to Oro Blanco on business, and there she was, working in a restaurant. I recognized her immediately." "And you fell in love?" Grace asked romantically. "We did," Hannah said. "We spent time together, got to know each other, and we realized that we were meant to be together." "So Mama is the reason we have this ranch and this family," Daniel said thoughtfully. "That is right," Kade said. "If your mother had not saved me that day, I would not be here. None of this would be here. She gave me my life, and then she gave me all of you. That is why I will always say that I owe her my heart. From that very first day until my very last day, my heart belongs to her." The children were quiet for a moment, absorbing the story. Then Samuel said, "I am glad Mama saved you, Papa." "So am I, son," Kade said, his voice thick with emotion. "So am I." As the children grew older, the ranch grew with them. Daniel, at 16, was essentially running the day-to-day operations alongside Kade. Grace, at 13, had begun teaching at the small school that had been established in the nearby town, sharing her love of learning with younger children. Samuel, at 10, showed an interest in animal husbandry and spent hours studying the cattle, learning their individual quirks and needs. Kade and Hannah, now in their 50s, had settled into a comfortable rhythm. They still worked hard, but they also made time to enjoy the fruits of their labor. They would take long rides together, exploring the land that had become so dear to them. They would sit on the porch in the evenings, holding hands and watching the sunset, talking about their day or simply enjoying the comfortable silence of long companionship. One day in the summer of 1900, a letter arrived from Oro Blanco. It was from Mrs. Chen, who still ran the restaurant that had once been the Silver Dollar. She wrote that she was finally retiring and wondered if Hannah might want to visit one last time before the building was sold to new owners who planned to turn it into a mercantile. Hannah showed the letter to Kade, and he could see the nostalgia in her eyes. "We should go," he said. "Take a trip, just the two of us. Daniel can manage the ranch for a week or two. It would be good for him to have the full responsibility." They made the journey to Oro Blanco in early September, when the worst of the summer heat had passed. The town had changed even more in the 17 years since they had been married there. It was larger, more prosperous, with paved streets and electric lights in some of the buildings. But the church where they had married still stood, whitewashed and proud. They visited it together, standing in the sanctuary and remembering that joyful day. "You have any regrets?" Kade asked Hannah as they stood hand in hand in the empty church. "About leaving your life here, about the restaurant, about any of it?" Hannah turned to him, and her green eyes, though framed now by fine lines, were as clear and direct as they had been when she was 17. "Not a single one. Every choice I made led me to you, to our children, to the life we built. How could I regret any of that?" They spent a week in Oro Blanco, visiting with old friends, sharing meals, reminiscing. Mrs. Chen hosted a small party in their honor at the restaurant, and it was bittersweet to see the place where Hannah had once worked and later owned, knowing it would soon become something else entirely. On their last night in town, Kade and Hannah walked out to the place where they had first met, where the trail ran past the cluster of saguaro cacti. It was twilight, the sky painted in shades of purple and gold. The landscape had not changed much. The desert was timeless in its harsh beauty. "I was so scared that day," Hannah admitted, standing on the spot where she had fired her rifle at the bandits. "I had never shot at a person before. I was shaking so hard I am amazed I hit anything at all." "You were steady as a rock," Kade said. "I remember watching you stand over me, and even though I was hurt and confused, I thought you were the most incredible person I had ever seen." "And now?" Hannah asked with a teasing smile. "Now I know you are," Kade said seriously. "You are my partner, my love, the mother of my children, the reason I wake up grateful every single morning. You are everything, Hannah." She kissed him then, there on the spot where she had saved his life so many years ago, and it felt like closing a circle, completing a journey that had begun in violence and fear, and had led to love and family and home. They returned to the ranch renewed, carrying with them the memories of where they had started and a deepened appreciation for where they had arrived. Daniel had indeed managed everything perfectly in their absence, proving himself more than capable of eventually taking over the operation. The years continued their steady march. The children grew into adults, each finding their own path while remaining connected to the family and the ranch. Daniel married a sweet young woman from a neighboring ranch, and they had children of their own, giving Kade and Hannah the joy of grandchildren. Grace pursued her art and her teaching, eventually marrying a doctor who had come to the territory from Boston. Samuel took over the management of the herd, implementing innovative techniques that increased the quality and profitability of their cattle. Through it all, Kade and Hannah remained the center, the foundation upon which the family was built. They watched with pride as their children thrived, as their grandchildren were born, as the legacy they had created continued to grow and flourish. On their 25th wedding anniversary in 1908, the entire extended family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. There were more than 30 people present, counting children and grandchildren, sons-in-law and daughters-in-law, and close friends who had become like family over the years. A long table was set up outside, laden with food that Hannah and the other women had spent days preparing. There was music and dancing, laughter and storytelling. As the sun began to set, Daniel stood and called for everyone's attention. "I want to propose a toast," he said, raising his glass. "To my parents, Kade and Hannah Harrison. 25 years ago, they took a chance on love. They built this ranch from almost nothing, raised 3 children, and created a legacy that will endure for generations. But more than that, they showed us what it means to truly love someone, to be partners in every sense of the word. Papa always says that Mama saved his life, and maybe that is literally true. But I think they saved each other. They found each other when they most needed it, and they built a life that is rich in all the ways that matter." To Kade and Hannah, to Kade and Hannah, everyone echoed, raising their glasses. Kade looked at Hannah, saw the tears streaming down her face, and felt his own eyes grow wet. He stood and helped her to her feet, and they stood together before their family, their legacy, the proof of their love. "Thank you all for being here," Kade said, his voice carrying across the gathering. 25 years ago, I married the woman who saved my life. I told her then that I had owed her my heart all along, from that very first day when she appeared like an angel and drove off the men who would have killed me. And it is still true. My heart has been hers for 35 years now, and it will be hers for whatever time we have left." He turned to Hannah, taking both her hands in his. "You are my everything, my partner, my love, my best friend. You made me want to be better than I was. You gave me a reason to build something lasting. You gave me this family, this life, this joy. I cannot imagine any of it without you, and I would not want to." Hannah was crying openly now, but she was also smiling, her face radiant with happiness. "And you gave me a reason to love again, to hope again, to believe that the future could be bright. You honored my past while building our future. You cherished me, protected me, and stood beside me through everything. I love you, Kade Harrison. I always will." They kissed, and their family erupted in cheers and applause. The celebration continued late into the night, with stories told and memories shared, with children running wild in the gathering darkness and adults reminiscing about years gone by. As the evening wound down and guests began to depart or settle in for the night in various rooms and outbuildings, Kade and Hannah stole away to their favorite spot on the porch. They sat together on the bench they had placed there years ago, holding hands and watching the stars emerge in the vast western sky. "Can you believe it has been 25 years?" Hannah asked softly. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday," Kade said. "Sometimes it feels like we have always been together." "I suppose we have, in a way," Hannah said. "From that moment on the trail, our lives were connected. It just took us a while to find our way back to each other." "I am glad we did," Kade said. "I am grateful for every moment, every day. Even the hard ones, because we faced them together." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the night sounds of the ranch. Finally, Hannah said, "Do you know what I think about sometimes?" "What is that?" "All the things that had to happen exactly right for us to end up here. If I had not been traveling that road with my father that day, if I had listened when he told me it was too dangerous to help, if you had not come back to Oro Blanco 10 years later, if I had not taken the job at the restaurant where you would see me." So many little moments, so many choices, all leading to this. "Fate," Kade said, "or destiny, or maybe just luck." "I prefer to think of it as a gift," Hannah said. "A blessing. We were given a chance and we took it, we made the most of it." "That we did," Kade agreed. They remained on the porch long after everyone else had gone to sleep, reluctant to end this perfect day. When they finally retired to their bedroom, they made love with the tenderness and familiarity of long partnership, reaffirming their bond one more time. The years that followed their 25th anniversary were peaceful and productive. The ranch continued to thrive under the combined efforts of the family. Kade and Hannah gradually stepped back from the daily management, letting their children and their children's spouses take on more responsibility. But they remained active, offering advice and assistance when needed, enjoying the role of elder statesmen of the family. More grandchildren were born, filling the ranch with new life and energy. Kade and Hannah delighted in their roles as grandparents, spoiling the children in ways they had never indulged their own, sharing stories and wisdom accumulated over decades of living. In 1915, as the world beyond their valley was embroiled in war and upheaval, Kade and Hannah celebrated their 32nd wedding anniversary quietly, with just their immediate family present. Kade was now 70 years old, still strong but showing the effects of a lifetime of hard work. Hannah was 65, her honey-colored hair now silver, but her green eyes still sharp and bright. They sat together on the porch, as they had done so many thousands of times before, and reflected on the journey they had taken together. "Do you ever wonder what your life would have been like if you had not saved me that day?" Kade asked. Hannah considered the question seriously. "Sometimes. I suppose I would have continued traveling with my father until he settled. I probably would have married someone else eventually, lived a different life. But I cannot really imagine it. This life, our life, feels like the only one that was ever meant to be." "I feel the same way," Kade said. "Everything before you was just preparation, just waiting. My real life started the day you saved me, even though I did not know it at the time." "We were both saved that day," Hannah said. "Not just physically, though that was part of it, but we were saved from loneliness, from meaninglessness. We found our purpose in each other." As the sun set over the hills, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and red, Kade took Hannah's hand and held it gently. The skin was thin now, marked with age spots, but to him it was still the most beautiful hand in the world. "I love you, Kade Harrison," he said. "From that day 35 years ago when you stood over me with your rifle, to this moment right now, to whatever comes next, my heart has been yours all along, and it always will be." "And mine has been yours," Hannah said, squeezing his hand. "Always and forever." They sat together as darkness fell. Two souls who had found each other against all odds, who had built a life and a legacy of love. Around them, the ranch they had created together settled into sleep, filled with the family they had made, the dream they had realized. The story that had begun with violence and fear, with a young girl's courage and a man's desperate need, had become something beautiful. It had become a testament to the power of love, to the possibility of second chances, to the magic that can happen when two people choose to build something together. Kade and Hannah Harrison lived many more years, growing old together on their ranch in New Mexico, surrounded by children and grandchildren, by the land they had nurtured, and by the love that had sustained them through everything. When they finally passed, within months of each other, as if neither could bear to be without the other for long, they left behind a legacy that would endure for generations. But more than the ranch, more than the material success, more than even the family they had created, they left behind a story. A story of how a single moment of courage could change everything. A story of how love could find a way, even across years and distance and hardship. A story of how two people who saved each other's lives could build something that would last forever. And in the evenings, when the grandchildren and great-grandchildren would gather on that same porch, someone would inevitably ask about Kade and Hannah, about how they met, about the famous line that Kade had spoken to Hannah on their wedding day. The story would be told again, embellished and refined with each retelling, but always true at its core. A cowboy was saved by a brave young woman. 10 years later, he found her again. And when he learned what she had done, he said the words that would define their love. Then I've owed you my heart all along." It was a debt he had paid gladly, every single day for the rest of his life. And in the paying of it, they had both become richer than they had ever dreamed possible.